I was gonna say hello, but I choked. Hello, it's me, Junebug. Based off of my appearance, it doesn't look like I should be recording right now, but it was torrential downpour earlier, and now my hair is that half, like, wet, dry, slimy-ish kind of thing, and then, like, this is really dry and brittle. My hair is having struggles, so I'm not supposed to put any heat on it, so that's why I didn't just blow dry it. And I ain't got time for that. So this is how I look. I tried to up the ante by doing more makeups, but again, on camera, I just look not good. But that's okay. You're not here to look at me. You're here for the true crime facts. Oh, bonked the microphone, sorry. So, two things. One, the state of the world in tears at my husband's, Genesis's computer desk. I also use the computer. Just with the Texas shooting, and then there's Ukraine, and then there's the economy, everyone complaining about the president and Congress and this and that, and then the baby formula shortage, and then the Roe versus Wade thing, and then all the things. I literally Googled, are we going to be okay? I didn't really have much to say. Second of all, because of that, we need to just smile sometimes. I'm bringing on a very special guest, Bip. Come on out here. This is Bip. Cute little stuffed animal I have. Figured you can look at her. Well, more sadness. I'm going to tell you more sadness, because if you're sad about the state of the world, just, true crime will perk you right up. And this case, I never heard of before either. When I started doing the research, I think I did cry. I definitely got teary-eyed, but I think I did cry. What do you think, Bip? Like Bailey, Sarian, and Joan. It's Junebug and Bip. Why Bip? I don't know. It just came out of my mouth. Yeah, buckle up, Bip. You're probably gonna cry. So today's case is sort of about 3 people. It is about 3 people, but obviously there's more people involved. Sorry, I keep bonking that. Not used to having my hair down. So it's about the victims, Mary Thames, or Thames, I assume Thames, and Betty Binnicker, and then George Stinney. This happened March 23rd of 1944, and I also saw some sources that said 24th as well. Pick your day. And the ages are 9 and 11 and 14, and then I also saw some sources that said 7. And this happened in Columbia, South Carolina, or Alcaloo, so like a smaller area, maybe on the outskirts of Columbia. And unfortunately, this is unsolved. They thought they solved it, but we'll get into that. But the conviction was vacated, so that's a first on this channel for me. So I always like to start off, if you think this sounds vaguely familiar, I point out some references in pop culture, so you're like, oh, that. So this case inspired novels Carolina Skeletons by David Stout and Billy by Albert French. And then Stinney, George Stinney, who I said was one of the victims, had a quote-unquote cameo in the 2021 movie Candyman as a trapped soul. Obviously, quote-unquote cameo because it was not actually him. Surprise. So we're just going to jump right into this. Hopefully it's not as long as my other videos. After school, on March 24th, 1944, Betty June Binnicker, who was 11, and Mary Emma Thames, who was 7 or 8, pretty much the same age, and both white, it comes into play, set out on a bike to hunt for maypops, which are a tart fruit from a pretty wildflower. I remember seeing what the wildflower was called, but I forgot. You can look it up, it won't be hard to find. And they followed the railroad tracks past the busy lumber mill where their fathers worked, and most of Alcaloo's men worked, honestly. And they ran into George Stinney Jr. He's a junior, who was 14. He was with his little sister Amy, who was 7 or 8. I don't know if I got the ages confused or if other sources got the ages confused with Emma, but one of them was 7, one of them was 8, whether they were both 8 or both 7. Anyway, George and his sister were letting the family cow out to graze, like, just taking a cow for a walk. You do that bit, right? And they were both black. Again, this comes into play. The girls asked if they knew where to find maypops. And George and Amy didn't know, so the girls continued on their way to go find some maypops. Now, I want to remind y'all, because this is 1944, that segregation is still going strong. And the black and white towns were separated by the railroad tracks in Elkaloo. This is why I'm also referencing who is black and who's white. And diving right in, unfortunately, Betty and Mary never returned home that night. So the next day, search parties involving 100 to 200 people, including George Stinney and his father, because George remembered seeing them earlier, like, hey, they asked what some maypops were. And they went around town searching. And then a preacher's son would end up finding the girls lying face up in a waterlogged ditch, dead. Which is horrible. I don't know how old the preacher's son was. So if he was the same age as finding, like, his classmates, that would have been brutal, I feel like. Or at any age finding a deceased person, but especially your own age, I feel like. It was said that both of their deaths were said to be caused by blunt force trauma to the head. Their skulls were broken and shattered, so that kind of gave it away what happened. It was said Betty, who was the older of the two, had some bruising on her genitalia, but no signs of actual, like, rape. So I don't know if it was, like, from the bike seat, because I'm a lady. Sometimes the bike seat hurts after a while. Like, it hurts your lady bits. So maybe that's where it came from. But either way, she had some bruising on her genitalia, but no evidence of a full sexual assault happening. And Mary, the younger girl, did not have any of this. No bruising, no sexual assault signs or anything, just Betty. Later that day, remember George Stinney Jr. and his older brother Johnny were arrested for the crime. They were arrested due to being seen with the girls the day prior. Also, since he's black and people be racist. I would say back then, but people still be racist today. But people be really racist in 1944. And because this happened so fast and then people were angry, George's father, George Stinney Sr., he was fired from his job that day. And then the family had to flee due to a lynch mob and for their safety. And his parents did not get to see him, George, again until the trial. Now, his brother Johnny, his older brother, was later released and dropped off on the side of a highway. I don't know what made them release Johnny necessarily. Well, he didn't do it, but why they kept George but let Johnny go, I don't know. I don't even know why they had taken Johnny in the first place. Probably just because they're racist. But they just dropped him off on the side of a highway. And I think he found his way to his family, thankfully. But George's arresting officer, who was H.S. Newman, who sucks, by the way, told the papers George confessed to killing the girls for 40 minutes after his arrest. There's also no proof of this. And George was all alone. He didn't have, like, a lawyer, his brother, he didn't have his family members. He was arrested that day, and like 40 minutes later, apparently he's saying he killed the girls. Even though he was in the search party looking for them, and no one saw him with them, minus that one time where he said he doesn't know where maypops are. The police officer, his arresting officer, remember the H.S. Newman, also said that George was mad at the girls. That's why he killed them, because, quote unquote, they resisted his sexual advances, end quote. He's 14. So he's like a freshman in high school, and the girls were his sister's age. I really don't think, well, I mean, people be crazy, but there's no evidence of this. The papers, they just gobbled it up, I guess, and so did the white community. So George, unfortunately, sat alone in jail until his trial on April 24th of 1944. So about a month, exactly. And when they were in trial, the council never questioned the two different versions of George's quote-unquote confession, because there was two different ones. Probably the one from the arresting officer and maybe one from George trying to saying what he thinks the police officer wants to hear. They also ignored the fact that there was no evidence and there was no record of this so-called confession. Literally only H.S. Newman's statement that he said it. Like, he didn't write it down, he didn't do anything. He just said George said it. That was all they were going on, basically. And George's counsel didn't call any witnesses, unfortunately. They didn't cross-examine any witnesses and offered little to no defense. I'm guessing due to a bird just flew by like really close to the window. Due to segregation, like, obviously he was not given cream of the crop lawyer. He was not given just adequate things for a defense, which is horrible because he's 14 and he really doesn't know what's happening, I'm guessing. Like, court mumbo-jumbo wise. I think he's aware that something bad's going on. But the whole trial lasted about 2.5 hours. And then this freaking Johnny Depp Amber Heard one's been going on, was it 6 weeks? This about murder took 2.5 hours. I had college classes longer than that. But also, the all-white jury spent about 10 minutes deliberating before finding him guilty and sentenced him to death by electric chair. The audacity of these people, Bip. All-white jury. How they found him guilty? Probably just from that dude's statement. And they're like, sure. He's right, he's white. I'm guessing that's how they think. I don't know if there was any women or not in the trial. It made it seem like it was all white men, but I'm not 100% sure. But I do know for sure it was all white people. And also, no appeal was ever filed from George's team/counsel. Unfortunately. Granted, I feel like it would have just been denied. But you gotta try. Hey, you gotta try. Gotta try, babe. Meanwhile, we still don't truly know who killed the girls, mind you. But thankfully, many people protested his death sentence due to his age. He's 14. And also, there's still no proof that he truly did it. So people were protesting and writing letters to, I want to say the governor, the mayor. They were writing letters to everybody they could think of. Even, I believe some white people too were like, dude, he's 14. Calm down. Where's the evidence? Like, show your horses, your electric horses. Let's think for a moment. But nothing came from this. Unfortunately, none of the protests brought anything forward. Except this response from Governor Allen D. Johnston. He, when asked to grant clemency, said this, quote, I have just talked with the officer who made the arrest in this case. It may be interesting for you to know that Stinney killed the smaller girl to rape the larger one. Then he killed the larger girl and raped her dead body. 20 minutes later, he returned and attempted to rape her again, but her body was too cold. All of this he admitted himself, end quote. Again, there's no proof that this conversation ever took place. And remember, he's mentioned only the officer who arrested him. There's been no other mentions of other officers saying he said any of this. It's never been written down, never been proven. There's no physical evidence to prove George did any of this. He was just taking the family cow out for a walk. But also remember, medical examiners and autopsies proved these allegations to be 100% false. Betty just had the bruising on her genitals, but there was no indication of any sexual assault on either girl. Nothing of the sorts. And another thing that broke my heart during this was between George's arrest and his execution, because they're still planning on going through with it, his parents were only allowed to see him once. And it was after trial when he was in prison. So after he was given the guilty verdict. And they were only able to visit him once because there were so many threats to them about lynching for visiting their son. How scary it must have been to be in George's place. I would be terrified. I'd probably just be crying the whole time. He's a strong little guy. And then it said George, when he was in prison, awaiting execution, it was said he befriended a 17-year-old Wilford Johnny Hunter whilst awaiting the execution. Johnny was put in prison due to like a high-speed car chase crash thing. I think it mentioned they were out of room in jail, so they sent him to the big boy prison, which was big boy jail, which is prison. Sorry, my words got tangled there. But he wasn't like on death row. He's just there serving some time. But Hunter said George liked to sing country songs and to play hide and seek in the bunks, because he's a kid and he likes to play. So George would also ask Hunter why they would kill him for something he didn't do. And Hunter felt bad because he could never answer him. They also hugged each other goodbye on the day of George's execution. He seemed like he cared for George and knew he did not do it, and he should not be going to his death right now. So on June 16th of 1944, at 7:30 p.m., George was placed in the electric chair. And it said that, quote-unquote, rumors that he sat on a Bible as a booster seat because he was too short. This cannot be confirmed or denied, but I can see how he might be too short. So yes, George was placed in the electric chair, possibly on a Bible for a booster seat, very ironic, and he was executed. It was also quote-unquote rumored that his mask slipped off and he could be seen crying during the ordeal. Which I can't confirm or deny if it's true, but I probably would be crying. Granted, I don't know if it's possible to cry while being electrocuted. I don't know the science behind that. Don't quote me on that. This was just rumored to be what happened. And a man named Lloyd Batson, who was a white pastor, was asked to attend the execution by George's father so he could look in the child's eyes and know someone in the room loved him. Because his parents, none of his family could be there. I'm getting teary-eyed just reading that sentence. Brought tears to my eye when I was doing the research. They asked this pastor who was white that he could go in and look at George, and George would know someone loved him in that room. Whew. Thank you, Bip. Just look at Bip. And George didn't have any final words. They did ask, and he just said, "No, sir." And he was buried in Calvary Baptist Church Cemetery. It was in an unmarked grave, but now he does have a marked grave. I believe. I believe it is marked now with like a proper headstone, which is good. He at least deserves that. And unfortunately, this case and trial wouldn't be questioned until 2004, which was 60 years later. It took someone 60 years, 60 years to publicly say, I don't think this was right, by a local historian, George Frierson, and others later on, obviously. But it took another 10 years till 2014 when Judge Carmen Mullen vacated George's conviction, so no longer finding him guilty. But a little bit late for that, don't you think? Bip does not approve. The sentiment's there, but you still killed him. Well, not this particular judge or anyone who was doing the research today, but you know what I mean. His little sister's still alive. Like, she can remember this. Like, how horrible is that? But remember, the original victims were Betty and Emma. George was another horrific victim because they thought he did it. But who actually killed Betty and Emma? I mean, it's not truly known for certain, but it was believed a wealthy white man was actually the killer. George Burke Jr., another George. This one's White George. Mean White George, if that helps you distinguish it, whose father, who was also a wealthy man, owned the property the girls' bodies were found on. It was also stated that George Burke Jr. was seen giving the girls a ride to go find flowers that day, who also, George Burke Jr., served on the jury that convicted Stinney and put him to death, and whose family said they have a deathbed confession from him about killing the girls. He did die in 1947, so this could have been resolved very fast. A lot faster than 60 years. Actually, no, 70 years at this point. Almost 80 years now. 78 years. So yeah. Bodies were found on Daddy's land. He gave a ride to the girls. Served on the jury. And they're said to have a deathbed confession from him. Sounds to me like he is the asshole who did it. But they had to electrocute the little black kid that had nothing to do with it. Sure, he saw them that day. Lots of people saw them that day. Their teachers saw them. Their classmates saw them. Betty and Emma saw each other. Their parents saw them. Amy saw them. They didn't question Amy, just George. Well, and Johnny for that brief moment, who wasn't even outside. The cow saw them. They didn't question the cow. Just George. So, that's the case of these poor 3 children who lost their lives. I'm going to say due to this white dude. Again, it's not entirely proven because he died in 1947. And, like, any physical evidence is probably gone by now. I can't say for certain because maybe there is. I don't know. It's just... It seems so unbelievable, but yet believable. And yet somehow so far away, but yet Amy, the little sister, is still alive to this day. I believe she's still alive. I believe. But I got a lot of my information from, I wanted to mention, Post and Courier. They had a 5-part article series about George and overturning his case. Overturning his verdict. There we go. I highly recommend if you want more in-depth about that and more of how they overturned it and the process to that and more about Alkaloo. I really suggest you check it out. It definitely pulls at your heartstrings. I cried. But I didn't want to just read that verbatim. But I try to give as much info as I can to get the point across. This is definitely infuriating to read and very sad. And unfortunately it is, I want to say it's unbelievable, but that is the unfortunate case of Betty Binnicker, Emma Thames, and George Stinney. Anyway, I don't want to say I hope you enjoyed the story, because that seems weird to say. Well, I guess I hope you enjoyed looking at Bip. She's nice. I could pretend it's my hamster. Snowball would not do this during the day or at night, but Bip will. I don't know when a new true crime's coming out from me. Not that anyone's super concerned. I haven't even started the research for it. That's it. Sorry about my appearance and my gross hair. He's Bip's cute. Should Bip be regular on the show? The show. Anything. But I'm gonna leave you with this, and don't put children to death. Please. Because even if the off chance he did do it, I feel like that was very, very, very extreme. And he should have had a fair trial. Everything should have been fair. Please be safe. People be crazy. See you next time.